بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Tonight's lesson inshallah ta'ala will be on Lulu Wal Marjaan فيما اتفق عليه الشيخان, and we're still in Kitab al-Hajj, and tonight's discussion will be on chapter number 69. Chapter 69. The author rahimahullah ta'ala states باب نقض الكعبة وبنائها. حديث عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت قال لي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لولا حداثة قومك بالكفر لنقضت البيت ثم لبنيته على أساس إبراهيم عليه السلام فإن قريشا استقصرت بناءه وجعلت له خلفا. حديث عائشة رضي الله عنها زوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال وأن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال لها ألم تري أن قومك لما بنوا الكعبة اقتصروا على قواعد إبراهيم؟ فقلت يا رسول الله ألا تردها على قواعد إبراهيم؟ قال لولا حدثان قومك بالكفر لفعلت. فقال عبد الله رضي الله عنه وهو ابن عمر لأن كانت عائشة رضي الله عنها سمعت هذا من رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ما أرى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ترك استلام الركنين اللذين يليان الحجر إلا أن البيت لم يتمم على قواعد إبراهيم. So chapter number 69 states demolishing of the Kaaba and its reconstruction. Hadith 841 is narrated Aisha, Allah be pleased with her, Allah's messenger, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, said to me, were your people not close to the pre-Islamic period of ignorance, I would have demolished the Kaaba and would have rebuilt it on its original foundations laid by Ibrahim. For Quraysh had reduced its building, and I would have built a back door. قال وجعلت له خلفا فإن قريشا استقصرت بناءه وجعلت له خلفا. Hadith Aisha radiallahu anha, the next narration 842 is also reported by Aisha. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to her, do you know that when your people rebuilt the Kaaba, they reduced it from its original foundation laid by Ibrahim? I said, oh Allah's Messenger, why don't you rebuild it on its original foundation laid by Ibrahim? He replied, were it not for the fact that your people are close to the period of ignorance, I would have done so. The sub-narrator, Abdullah bin Umar, stated, Aisha must have heard this from Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For my opinion, Allah's Messenger had not placed his hand over the two corners of the Kaaba opposite of Al-Hijr, only because the Kaaba was not rebuilt on its original foundations laid by Ibrahim. All right, so chapter number 69 is something which is a sub-discussion. A sub-discussion. It isn't something which is directly pertaining to Hajj. It isn't directly pertaining to the rulings and the regulations of Hajj, but it's pertaining to the rulings of the regulations of Hajj indirectly. Obviously, when a person is making Hajj, as we've discussed and learned, there are several times and pieces of involvement and interaction and behavior with the Kaaba. Things that you are to do and things that you are not to do when you're making Hajj or Umrah with regards to the Kaaba. Making tawaf, touching, kissing, praying behind, etc. So therefore, how was the Kaaba constructed and erected? How was it built? What was it built upon, etc.? That's something which does not directly pertain to the manasik of Hajj, but there are some indirect involvements to Hajj. Everybody clear on this? So that's chapter 69 with regards to taking the Kaaba back to its original foundation and then proceeding from there. All right. Is it from the Sunnah to do this? Did the Prophet ﷺ agree with things that were changed and altered? And if he didn't agree, if he disagreed, and he wanted to take things back to the original organic way, why didn't he? What stopped him? That's what that chapter heading is dealing with. All right? Khair inshallah. So two narrations, And both of them are reported by Aisha, radiallahu anha, the Prophet's wife, as the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gives a reason and an excuse. He justifies why he does not take action to return things to how they were, how they should be. And that is the original way that Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam constructed and erected the Kaaba. And the fear of Quraysh, the Arab tribes that had just left off polytheism and idolatry, that had just left off making tawaf naked, that had just gave off this sacrifice and this idol, etc., the fear of them having some type of doubt and them not being able to stomach the sight of this sacred house being demolished, it says, and then rebuilt. And them returning and referring back to kufr and shirk. Them seeing something that they cannot what? Stomach. They can't take it. And that was the only reason why the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not take things where and how they used to be according to the pure way before the innovations of idolatry and polytheism, Ibrahim's way. Now, everyone understand this? So that's what that chapter heading is discussing, and that's what those two hadiths are discussing. An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says here, and obviously there are some issues here, he says, وَجَعَلَتْ لَهُ خَلْفًا, or وَجَعَلْتُ لَهُ خَلْفًا. There's a problem here on page 423 with regards to the translation and the diacritical marks. It says, فَإِنَّ قُرَيْشًا اسْتَقْصَرَتْ بِنَاءَهُ وَجَعَلَتْ لَهُ خَلْفًا. They made a back door for it, or وَجَعَلْتُ لَهُ خَلْفًا, and I would have made a back door for it, right? So that's something to pay attention to in the book. Wallahu ta'ala. An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says regarding this chapter and these hadiths, في هذا الحديث دليل لقواعد من الأحكام منها إذا تعارضت المصالح أو تعارضت مصلحة ومفسدة وتعذر الجمع بين فعل المصلحة وترك المفسدة بدأ بالأهم، لأن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أخبر أن نقض الكعبة وردها إلى ما كانت عليه من قواعد إبراهيم مصلحة، ولكن تعارضه مفسدة أعظم منه، وهي خوف فتنة بعض من أسلم قريبا، وذلك لما كانوا يعتقدونه من فضل الكعبة فيرون تغييرها عظيما فتركها صلى الله عليه وسلم. So before Nawawi discusses and before he gets into the fiqh of this chapter, he mentions some general principles, some maxims, some qawaid. Put it back in me.
It's a little low.
Is it better now? Maybe it's Allah. Inshallah it's better. طيب خير inshallah. Okay. So Nawawi rahimahullah, Allah's mercy be upon him, he says that this chapter, these hadiths, they teach us qawa'id min al-ahkam, maxims, a pillar that supports the direct and indirect, exclusive, the implicit, explicit rulings, a qaida, a principle, a rule, a maxim, something that is used for a dalil when there's no specific dalil. In English and in Arabic, these terms are different. A asl is not necessarily a qaida. They're different, even though there's some times in which they can be synonymous or used synonymously, right? A dabit. So there's hunaka dabit, or hunaka aslan, or hunaka qaida. Those are three different things. In English, we say a rule. In English, we say a general principle. In English, we say a maxim. Now, what's important is the qaida fiqhiyya is not asl fiqhi or dabit fiqhi. A qaida fiqhiyya is a dalil itself when there is no specific dalil. The proof that this is lawful or unlawful is this qaida. Usul fiqh, that's different. So here he says these are some maxims, qawaid, rulings with regards to the halal and the haram. The first qaida is that when there are pros and cons fighting with each other, there's a clash between pro and con. There's a benefit, a pro, an advantage that comes into collision or is going to come into collision with a con, a problem. Understand? Eating your cake and having it too, or having it and eating it too. Right? As we say this, you can't have your cake and eat it too. That's a pro and a con. The pro of the cake is to eat it. And at the same time, I want to preserve my slice of cake or my cake. They can't what? You can't have both. One of the two must be picked or selected. So there's maslaha. There is something that's from the deen that we should do, that we need to do. If we do it, it's going to come into a collision course with what? A mafsada, a problem, a con. So when these two things come together and they clash, he says, the most important thing takes precedence. And he doesn't say that we put forth the con and lose out on the pro. He doesn't say that. But he says the what? The bigger of the two fish. Everybody with me or not? This is a benefit. This is a harm. If we do this benefit, this harmful thing will take place. If we leave off this benefit, we'll be free from this harmful thing taking place. What we hear, he says, is that the most important, the bigger, the happier of the two takes precedence. Understand? Like a rose. The rose is so beautifully red, so fragrant and aromatic, so soft, and there's a small little thorn. You getting scratched and poked by the thorn is a what? What words did I use? Mafsada. Khan. So mushkila. It's a problem, right? Pain. Scratching of your skin. Loss of blood. It's a mafsada. But the sweetness of the rose, the smell of the rose is so what? Huh? These guys, am I talking in the same language? Khalid. It's what?
It's a pro.
It's so, we know it's a pro already. That's already established, that's a pro, but it's so what? Anyway, it's so sweet. The smell of the rose, the beauty of the rose is so big and sweet that the scratch what? Doesn't matter. Because that is, in this instance, this analogy, that rose, that masla has what? Ahem, is more important. You get it? I'm making rose water, or I'm going to give a rose to my mother, or whatever the case may be. You understand? The smile that's going to be put on her face is much more impactful than a little band-aid or neosporin. Nah? Or, in order for me to grab the rose, the thorn is very long and sharp. It's going to prick me. It's going to cut me. It's going to scar me. That's mafsada, which is more long-term, more lasting than the maslaha of the rose. I can go to the store and buy roses. Methadone. Okay? So note here, he doesn't say that you automatically stay away from picking the rose because of the thorn. Rather, he says what? The most important. Right? You guys get it or not? Everybody with me or not? The most important. That thing takes precedence. No, he didn't say this. Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he informed Aisha that taking the Kaaba back to its original structure, its original foundation is a maslah. That's a pro. That's what it should be. That's how things should be. But there's a con which is greater. And that is the new Muslims from Quraysh, the people who respected the Kaaba in Jahiliyyah, who loved the Kaaba what?
Original.
In Jahiliyyah, they loved the Kaaba. They respected the Kaaba. It was a holy site to them what? Before Islam. So the Prophet said, demolishing it, taking it back to its original, that he says that's a greater harm. That's a greater harm. And that will cause them to have doubt, apostasy, maybe fight, blood will be shed, etc. Alright, so that is a qaida in life and in da'wah. There's a harm, there's a pro, there's a con. You have to weigh the what? The situation. Some scholars, some people, they say, is that precaution takes first. Leave the maslahah, protect yourself from makan. Others, they say, what Nawawi says is based off of what? The bigger of the two fish. Nah? And then one may say is to do what? Weigh, to look. Every situation is different. There's no default. You got it? Like warfare. Nah? Sending my troops in to advance. There's going to be casualties, loss of life. It's a fact. Injury, that's a message, that's a con. But the victory is right there. It's in sight. That maslahah what? One general may say that. And another general says what? No. I can't just squander the lives of my troops like that. You get it? Alright? And it depends on the situation, the ratio. Everyone understand this? So obviously, this goes to show us that there's going to be ijtihad. There's going to be what I'm going to do? You're going to have to, it's going to be subjective from what? Person to person. It's always going to just be this is right. It's going to be from person to person. All right. So therefore, one general he says the chance of all of the troops staying alive, going back to their homes, to their villages, to their farms, to their mothers, is slim. Somebody has to die. It's a fact. It's war. That's the nature of the business. We're not poets. We're not drinking tea. This is what? We're in the military. We're fighting. So therefore, for their mothers to be told that their sons died on the battlefield, serving their country, that we defeated the enemy, so on and so forth, that's better than what? Them losing their lives, holding on to their lives, and we lost. Everyone understand this? So that is potato. Subjective from person to person. You guys get the analogy I'm making or not? Nah. And it's easy to criticize someone that's not out there in the field on the battlefield. And this is applicable to dawah. Do I go to this masjid or not? Do I go to this conference or not? Do I make alliances with this dawah organization or not? Some people say there's a mafsada. You go in there, they're this, they're that, blah, 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 blah. And that takes what? Precedence of the fact that you want to get from teaching a class and another student, another scholar says what? No, the maslahat is greater. Well, how can that? Alright, so it's very important to understand these qawaid that are taken directly from the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Moving forward. Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he then states, وَمِنْهَا فِكْرُ وَلِيِّ الْأَمْرِ فِي مَصَالِحِ رَعِيَّتِهِ وَاجْتِنَابُهُ مَا يَخَافُ مِنْهُ تولد ضرر عليهم في دين أو دنيا إلا الأمور الشرعية كأخذ الزكاة وإقامة الحدود ونحو ذلك. The next qaida from this is that the leader, the wali al-amr, the Islamic leader, he is to take into consideration the harms and the benefits that pertain to his subjects, his flocks, his people. He has to take into consideration their wealth, their blood, their honor, their feelings. He has to take into consideration that which is going to hurt them or help them. And he can't just be selfish and self-absorbed or, oh, it doesn't matter, I don't care. But he must think about how they're going to feel afterwards. Whether it pertains to the deen or dunya, both. The spiritual needs and the material needs. Right? He has to be mindful of the people that he's a leader of. No states except for the affairs of Islam. Such as taking zakat for those who don't want to pay. These people want to be hurt if we seize their property. They want to be hurt if we freeze their account. They want to be hurt if we take the animals from them. The man's daughter is going to cry, that's my father. Oh, how can they do this? It's nothing personal. And it's not about feelings. The hudud. Everyone understand this? This man, he stole, he robbed, he murdered, he fornicated, whatever the crime was against the laws, the what? Put the heart down. It's not about crying or tears. Please don't do this to my dad. He's a good dad. Can't help you. I'm sorry. But the people that want to get upset if you do this, he's a noble person. If they want to laugh. Alright? And obviously that's a difficult thing. Being afraid of the people or being too soft and too kind, etc. Move forward. ومنها تألف قلوب الرعية وحسن حياطهم ولا ينفر ولا يتعرض لما يخاف تدفيرهم بسببه ما لم يكن فيه ترك أمر شرعي كما سبق. And he speaks on this, he reinforces this point with regards to not pushing the people away, not doing something that people cannot accept, people cannot stomach. It's just too much for them at the moment. to leave that off and to be mindful of that, as we previously explained. قال العلماء بني البيت 5 مرات بنته الملائكة ثم إبراهيم صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم قريش في الجاهلية وحضر النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم هذا البناء وله 35 سنة وقيل 25 وفيه سقط على الأرض حين وقع إزاره ثم بناه ابن الزبير ثم الحجاج بن يوسف واستمر إلى الآن على بناء الحجاج وقيل بني مرتين أخريين أو 3 وقد أوضحته في كتاب إيضاح المناسك الكبير. Noe states, and the scholars say, meaning before Noe's time, the Kaaba was built 5 times. There are 5 different stages or steps in the evolution of the construction and the erection of the Kaaba. The first time was done by the angels, the Malaika. Secondly, was done by Ibrahim. Then Quraysh, in the time of ignorance, Jahiliyyah, when they were mushriks. And that's when the Prophet ﷺ was there. The Prophet was at that event, and some scholars say he was 35, and others say he was 25. And some say that's when the Prophet ﷺ fell unconscious, and his izar had fallen down in the seerah. Moving forward, the 4th time it was built was by Abdullah ibn Zubayr. And the 5th time was Hajjaj ibn Yusuf. With regards to the different fights and wars and battles that took place after the Prophet ﷺ, the different civil wars, and so on and so forth, the Tabi'een, the Sahaba, etc. Moving forward, he says, and then the construction of the Kaaba, as it is today, remained from the time of Hajjaj. The time of Hajjaj. And others say there were 2 more times, and some say 3 more times. And I've explained that in another of my books, he states. قال العلماء ولا يغيروا عن هذا البناء وقد ذكروا أن هارون الرشيد سأل مالك بن أنس عن هدمها وردها إلى بناء ابن الزبير للأحاديث المذكورة في الباب فقال مالك ناشدتك الله يا أمير المؤمنين أن تجعل هذا البيت لعبة للملوك لا يشاء أحد إلا نقضه وبناه فتذهب هيبته من صدور الناس وبالله التوفيق. He says here, the ulama say is that the Kaaba is not to be reconstructed. It's not to be rebuilt, anything other than this. There's a story that Harun al-Rashid, one day he spoke to Imam Malik about this, about demolishing it and reconstructing it based off of Ibn al-Zubayr's, his era. So Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala, when he heard this from Harun al-Rashid, and y'all know Harun al-Rashid, his status, in the hadith regarding the original construction of the Kaaba, he said, O Amir al-Mu'mineen, commander, leader of the faithful, I ask you by Allah not to do this. Leave it alone. Stay away from it. Don't allow the Kaaba to be a toy or a plaything for the leaders and the kings. Whenever someone wishes to reconstruct it or expand it or update it or do this, they'll just play with it. Don't do that. He says because that will take the respect and the awe and the veneration. It would take the status of the Kaaba out of the people's hearts. If every year, every 5 years, every 10 years, every 50 years is a new rebuilding of it. Leave it as it is. And obviously this statement of Imam Malik is tremendous. Tremendous, profound. And how when something is demolished, remade, demolished, remade, demolished, remade, done again, it takes the what? The people that lose it. You just think about Dawah now. We spoke on this many times before. The scholar comes, he teaches classes, he writes books, he gives fatwa, he gives teachings, he's refuted, he's thrown out. Then what? Another comes. The people benefit, they come to the masjid, they learn, then what? He's an innovator. Then a third, then a fourth, then a fifth, then a sixth, then a seventh, and an eighth. At the end of 10, 20 years, the people are going to lose respect and love for knowledge and the people of knowledge. And they're going to say, here comes another one. Here comes another movement. Here comes another killer. In 6 months, in a year, he'll be this. And that's exactly how we live. And it's applicable to anything else in life. When something is just continually turned over and flipped over, it doesn't become anything special anymore. It's not sacred when it's people's hands keep touching it. all right, and dealing with it and playing with that thing, all right? So there's a qaida of life. Leave the Kaaba as it is. Oh, Harun al-Rashid, don't touch it again, all right? Because you make a precedent and another king will what? Say, oh, this is incorrect, or this needs to be expanded, so on and so forth. Move forward. قوله صلى الله عليه وسلم وجعلت لها خلفا هو بفتح الخاء المعجمة واسكان اللام وبالفاء هذا هو الصحيح المشهور والمراد به باب من خلفها وقد جاء مفصلا في رواية أخرى وجعلت لها بابا شرقيا وبابا غربيا وفي صحيح البخاري قال هشام خلفا يعني بابا وفي رواية أخرى لمسلم بين أحدهما يدخل منه والآخر يخرج منه وفي رواية البخاري وجعلته خلفين قال القاضي وقد ذكر الحربي هذا الحديث هكذا وضبطه خلفين بكسر الخاء خلفين إلى آخره. طيب, what's meant by the back door? People to walk into the Kaaba from the front and to leave the Kaaba from the back or from behind. خير إن شاء الله. فيه دليل تقديم أهم المصالح عند تعذر جميعها كما سبق إيضاحه في أول الحديث وفيه دليل من جواز إنفاق كنز الكعبة ونذوره الفاضلة عن مصالحها في سبيل الله كما جاء في رواية أنفقت كنز الكعبة في بنائها وبناؤه من سبيل الله فلعله المراد وبقوله في رواية الأول كذا في سبيل الله وغوالا ومذهبنا أن الفاضلة من وقف. He says here, anything that's valuable in the Kaaba can be used in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is mentioned in another narration outside of us in Lulu Wal Marjaan. Khairan inshaAllah ta'ala. Alright, the hijr of the masjid. We'll get into that right now. Let's move forward bi'idhnillahi ta'ala to the next chapter. باب جدل الكعبة وبابها. حديث عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت سألت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم عن الجدل من البيت هو نعم أو قال نعم قلت فما لهم لم يدخلوه أو لم يدخلوه في البيت قال إن قومك قصرت بهم النفقة قلت فما شأن بابه مرتفعا قال فعل ذلك قومك ليدخلوا من شاءوا ويمنعوا من شاءوا ولولا أن قومك حديث عهدهم بالجاهلية فأخاف أن تنكر قلوبهم أن أدخل الجدر في البيت وأن ألصق بابه بالأرض. Chapter 70 says the wall of the Kaaba and its door. Hadith 843 is narrated by Aisha radiallahu anha. Asked the Prophet ﷺ whether the round wall near the Kaaba was part of the Kaaba. The Prophet ﷺ replied in the affirmative. I further said, what is wrong with them? Why have they not included it? Or why have they not included it in the building of the Kaaba? He said, don't you know that your people, Quraysh, ran short of money, so they could not include it inside of the building of the Kaaba. I asked, what about its gate? Why is it so high? He replied, your people did this so as to admit into whomever they liked and prevent whomever they liked. Or your people not close to the period of ignorance, and I were not afraid that they would dislike it. Surely I would have included the area or included the wall inside of the building of the Kaaba, and I've lowered its gate to the level of the ground. Chapter 70 is similar to chapter number 69 with regards to things that should be done with regards to the sacred house, which are not done. And it states that Quraysh, when they were reconstructing the Kaaba, they ran out of money. Meaning, as some scholars mention, lawful money, legitimate money. The money that was pure from buying and selling, trading, etc. As far as the money from prostitution or gambling or riba, etc., then some say that they had that money, but they didn't want no filthy money to be involved in the building of the Kaaba. Okay? Whether they ran out of money 100%, or whether they ran out of pure, legitimate, sacred money, the funds ran out. So therefore, they sufficed themselves with a lower or smaller design. Okay? And this hijr, another part, being actually included in the Kaaba, which is now excluded. Why is it like that? Similar to the previous chapter, with regards to the fear of the people, disliking it, rejecting it, there being a fitna, So therefore, we stomach the problem, in light of a bigger or greater one. Everyone understand this? Also, we see here that the Prophet ﷺ, he clearly says, Qawmaki, your people. Quraysh, and the Prophet ﷺ was from Quraysh. When he said this, and he clearly mentioned this to disassociate himself from their ignorant actions. Right? Like we mentioned before, your rulers. Go with your what? Rulers. Follow your scholars. Do it. That's your man. Method. Even though I know him too, lack of that, right? Also, the concept of the pride that they had and the racism and the prejudice. They made a higher level so certain people could be elected and selected inside of the Kaaba. And not everyone making tawaf could be allowed in. So they did this to make it exclusive, to prevent too many people, like a turnstile. Right? You have to, the crowd can't just, rush through, but one person what? At a time. You know what a turnstile is? It stops the people from flooding in. Right? Rather, no matter how many people are there, only what? One person can go at a time. So they did this, they made it on a higher level to prevent public access to the debate. Alright? And the Messenger of Allah, alayhi salatu wasalam, he says here, is that if it wasn't for the fear of them going back to kufr, then I would have taken it back to its original way. Now, as we mentioned before, this is not an absolute rule. There are times in which the leader says, we're going to do this, even though the people may dislike it. And it may cause an uproar. Something is obligatory, it's mandatory. Even though it's a problem, right? Whether it's a shrine or some type of erected grave, or tree, something that's shirk or bid'ah or kufr, that's not supposed to be. And the leader says, we're cutting it down, we're burning it down, we're demolishing it. Even though this country or these people are going to get mad and angry. Alright? So it isn't an absolute rule in which you fear the blame of the what? Blameless. There are some times in which you cannot care about what people think and feel. It's the deen of Allah. And there are other times in which you must what? Be mindful. A greater harm will come. Something that you don't want. Alright? And I said that's what going to be subjective from person to person. Situation to situation. And beware and be mindful of criticizing people that are playing the game from the sideline. Don't forget that. Why didn't he throw it to here? Why didn't he double team him? Right? Why did they run towards him? It's easy for us to say, but we're not there on the field playing. Even if it's a blunder to us. Alright? So just be mindful of that with regards to politics and Islam. Alright? Why did they do that? Well, that's harsh. Or these people did this and that. Be careful of what you say. Right? Because you're far from what they're doing and how they're living in that country. You're far from that. You're not experiencing the things that they're experiencing, right? Your child is driven to school, is picked up. Their school was blown up. There is no school, right? You have spring water and your refrigerator. They have to walk 2, 3, 5 miles to a well. Nah? You understand the difference? Be mindful. You take a 20-minute, 30-minute hot steaming shower. Steaming. Scrub, rinse, conditioner, shampoo. They may not take a ghusl every 6 days. It'll pale, right? So it's easy for someone to criticize what people are doing in different countries, different parts of the world, and you live in your comfortable lifestyle, okay? That's the advice. And Allah surely knows best. Moving forward. Next chapter, chapter number 71. باب الحج عن العاجز لزمانة وهرم ونحوهما أو للموت. حديث عبد الله بن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال كان الفضل رضي الله كان الفضل رديف رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فجاءت امرأة من خثعم فجعل الفضل ينظر إليها وتنظر إليه وجعل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يصرف وجه الفضل إلى الشق الآخر فقالت يا رسول الله إن فريضة الله على عبادي في الحج أدركت لي أو قد أدركت أبي شيخا كبيرا فقالت يا رسول الله إن فريضة الله على عبادي في الحج أدركت أبي شيخا كبيرا لا يثبت على الراحلة أفأحج عنه؟ قال نعم وذلك في حجة الوداع. حديث الفضل بن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال جاءت امرأة من خثعم عام حجة الوداع قالت يا رسول الله إن فريضة الله على عباده في الحج أدركت أبي شيخا كبيرا لا يستطيع أن يستوي على الراحلة فهل يقضي عنه أن حج عنه قال نعم. Chapter number 71 states to perform Hajj on behalf of the crippled, the old, and those who are dead. Hadith 844 is narrated by Abdullah ibn Abbas. Al-Fadl was riding behind Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and a woman from the tribe of Khat'am came. Al-Fadl ibn Abbas started looking at her, and she started looking at him. The Prophet ﷺ turned Fadl's face to the other side. The woman said, "O Allah's Messenger, the obligation of Hajj enjoined by Allah on his devotees has become due on my father, and he is old and weak, and he cannot sit firm on the mount. May I perform Hajj on his behalf?" The Prophet replied, "Yes, you may." That happened during the farewell pilgrimage. Hadith number 845 is narrated by Fadl ibn Abbas. A woman from the tribe of Khat'am came in the year of Hajj al-Wada, the farewell pilgrimage of the Prophet ﷺ, and said, "O Allah's Messenger, the obligation of Hajj enjoined by Allah on his devotees has become due on my father, and he is old and weak, and cannot sit properly on his mount. Will the obligation be fulfilled? Will the obligation be fulfilled if I perform Hajj on his behalf?" The Prophet ﷺ replied in the affirmative. He replied in the affirmative. So therefore, another aspect or another ruling of Hajj is Hajj being made for those who can't physically do it themselves. They're too old, they're too weak, they're too sick, or they died without making the Hajj. What's the ruling for a friend or a relative, an heir, a son, a daughter, to perform Hajj on behalf of that incapable Muslim? Now, inshallah, that's the discussion tonight. So the woman, she came, and Al-Fadl ibn Abbas was riding behind the Prophet ﷺ, and this woman came, and she happened to be from the tribe of Khat'am, and he looked at her, and she looked back at him. And the Prophet said, "What?" He turned away, "Lower your gaze, don't look at her." And then the woman, she wanted a fatwa. She asked the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, "O Messenger of Allah, Allah's faridah, the obligation of Hajj has come. وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ Hajjul Bayti, right? But my father, he's too weak, he can't sit on his camel. He can't stay still, his legs, his arthritis, his whatever problem that he has. Nah? He can't go and perform the Hajj. Can I make the Hajj for him?" And the Messenger of Allah, ﷺ, he answered the question of that woman seeking the guidance. Everyone understand what's being discussed here? Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he states here regarding this chapter and some of the benefits and the meanings of these hadiths. هذا الحديث فيه فوائد منها جواز الإرداف على الدابة إذا كانت مطيقة، وجواز سماع صوت الأجنبية عند الحاجة في الاستفتاء والمعاملة وغير ذلك، ومنها تحريم النظر إلى الأجنبية، ومنها إزالة المنكر باليد لمن أمكنه، ومنها جواز النيابة في الحج عن العاجز الميؤوس منه بهرم أو زمانة أو موت، ومنها جواز حج المرأة عن الرجل، ومنها بر الوالدين. He says here there's several hadiths in this, several benefits in this hadith, in this chapter. Number one is the permissibility of two people riding on one animal, as long as the animal can bear it. Meaning, there's nothing wrong with that if it doesn't hurt or harm the animal's back. Camel, donkey, mule, whatever it may be. It's not haram, it's not disliked. Nah? Another benefit he says here is the permissibility for a man to hear the voice of a non-mahram woman at the time of a question or an answer. Fatwa. She's ajnabiyya. He's not a mahram for her. She's not a mahram for him. He can what? Hear her voice because she's coming to ask about knowledge. So those who say you can't hear a woman's voice, that's not your wife, it's haram to have a male teacher to ask him a question or to call the imam's office or whatever the case may be, the hadith proves that it was what? It's lawful. Alright? He also says this hadith proves the impermissibility of looking at an ajnabi woman. A woman that you're not a mahram for, you're not allowed to look and stare. Now, before we go further, this hadith is used by many ulama to prove that the face and the hands are not obligatory to be covered in front of non-Muslims. Some scholars, they use this hadith as a proof, is that the aura of a mature Muslim woman is everything except for the hands and the face. Whereas, Fadl radiallahu anhu, he looked at her. And they say that if she was fully covered, then there wouldn't be anything for him to look at. Nor would the Prophet ﷺ have what? Turn his head away from her. Let alone what other narrations may state, other reports may state, Saf'a al-Khaddayn. She had very rosy cheeks. Right? Method. Okay? Don't nobody get excited, huh? Inshallah. What's important is, and obviously many people, not all, but many people find rosy cheeks to be attractive. That's why women wear rouge. Huh? Nah? So if a woman has rosy cheeks without any makeup, then Sahih? Even better, right? Sahih? Nah? Or the symbolism of a woman's rosy cheeks. She's shy, she's blushing, she's flushed, she's excited. Her cheeks are what? Method. Everyone understand this? Like, move forward. So, some scholars, they say this is a clear dalil that the woman's face was not covered, and the Prophet ﷺ did not make any inkar upon the woman, etc. Obviously, that's a long discussion, which we are not discussing now. We're just showing you how this hadith is used. Moving forward. Note he states here, Tahrim al-Nazar. He says the impermissibility of looking at an ajnabi woman. And he doesn't say looking at an ajnabi woman with lust or lustful intentions. But here he says, no. You can't look at her. So what's the dynamic of that? I can look at a woman that's not my wife if I'm not lusting, if there's a need or a benefit, or is it absolutely haram for me to look at her? Here he mentions, no. But one can come along and say, clearly, the context of hadith shows that there was some type of interest. He was looking at her and what? Regardless of why they were looking at each other. Maybe it wasn't us. Maybe it was like, what are you looking at? How can I help you? Do I know you from somewhere? And it's important to distinguish between the two. Somebody may stare at you, and it may not necessarily be a bad or malevolent intention. Right? Somebody may stare at you as a Muslim, not because they don't like Muslims, or they're trying to discriminate against you, but they may be amazed. And that's happened countless times. It's me. Someone's staring at you, you count someone staring at you, you make a mean face, or you say like, what's up, like, whatever, and they say, you look very nice, or I never knew people dressed like this, or whatever the case may be. All right? So people, they struggle and they suffer from awkwardness as well. Somebody may see you, they may like what you look like, but they don't know how to method, right? So the advice is that if there's a non-Muslim, or unfortunately, let's keep it real, a Muslim, it's not just kuffar, that's staring at you because you're dressed in a certain way, your beard, your pants, your wife is covered up, you don't necessarily have to stare back or say something nasty or mean, right? Because you never know their intention. And even if they are staring at you in a derogatory way, you kill them with kindness. Smile. How you doing? All right? Take a picture. It'll last longer. Have a nice day. Methodin, right? Idfa bilati ahsan. Sayyah, right? Just be mindful of that. Allah. No, he states from the fawaid of this hadith is removing the evil, stopping the evil, preventing the evil with one's physical hand. The Prophet had the ability to do what? Turn them away, and he with his hands. So clearly, Father was looking at her in that manner, and she was like, "What's going on?" Tamburu ilayhi, looking at him, right? So the Prophet ﷺ, he stopped the munkar, the evil, with his what? With his hands. And he didn't tell him to ittaqillah, stop, but he did what? Physically stopped him. So speaking out against the munkar based off of this is only to be resorted to if you can't what? Physically stop it. You got it? So a brother, he's drinking alcohol, bottle of whiskey, Jack Daniels, right? You take the bottle, what? You throw it down. And you don't necessarily have to say, fear Allah is haram to drink alcohol. But if you can remove it and break it and smash it, change it physically, then that what? That takes precedence over the verbal. Now, for those who have the ability of stopping it, right? Of changing it. Moving forward. ومنها بر الوالدين بالقيم أو بالقيام على الصحيح بمصالحهما من قضاء دين وخدمة ونفقة وحج عنهما وغير ذلك. Another faida from this hadith is serving your parents, respecting your parents, being dutiful to your parents, and taking care of them, paying off the debts, serving them, spending upon them, making hajj for them, etc. ومنها وجوب الحج على من هو عاجز بنفسه مستطيع بغيره كولده وهذا مذهبنا لأنها قالت أدركته فريضة الحج شيخا كبيرا لا يستطيع أن يثبت على راحلة. Another fact from this hadith is Hajj is mandatory upon those who are incapable of performing it themselves but have the ability to deputize someone else. They can't do it physically, but the money is there and someone else can do it for them. Hajj is now obligatory upon them. Right? I'm crippled, I have a disability, okay? I have a sickness, I have an illness, I can't go physically. But my son can go, my daughter can go. Or I want you to go. I'm hiring you to make Hajj for me. Hajj is what? It's mandatory upon them. It's obligatory upon them. He says, and this is our school of thought. This is what we believe. Many other scholars may say other things different. Move forward. The hadith clearly states, أدركته فريضة الحج, is that the injunction, the rule of Hajj has come upon him. ومنها جواز قول حجة الوداع وأنه لا يكره ذلك وسبق بيان هذا مرات. The permissibility of saying the farewell pilgrimage, and that's not disliked to say that. ومنها جواز حج المرأة بلا محرم إذا أمنت على نفسها وهو مذهبنا ومذهب الجمهور. جواز الحج عن العاجز إلى آخره. He says the permissibility of a woman making Hajj without a mahram, as long as she's safe. Permissibility for a woman to make Hajj without a mahram as long as she's safe. And this is the madhab of our school. He didn't necessarily say traveling, but he said performing Hajj. Does that mean she's already there in Mecca, she doesn't have to travel? Or is he speaking on a woman traveling to make Hajj what? Without a mahram. The Prophet ﷺ, where is this taken from? How do we deduce this point, Elias?
Well, because she was alone there with family.
She was alone when she went to the Prophet ﷺ. What else, Ahmed?
She was talking about
La, something else. The Prophet never said, where's your mahram? Do you have a mahram? Will you be accompanied by a mahram? But he said, yes, make the Hajj. That's the point of extraction, the deducement. You got it? Moving forward. Obviously, a woman traveling without a mahram is a discussion of myself. Is a woman allowed to make Hajj without a mahram? Is that an exception to the rule? That's what? Issue in itself, which we're not talking about right now. ومذهب الجمهور جواز الحج عن العاجز بموت أو غضب وهو الزمان أو حرام ونحو ما قال مالك والليث والحسن بن صالح لا يحج أحد عن أحد إلا عن ميت لم يحج حجة الإسلام. And then he mentions the difference of opinion among the ulama, among the scholars, with regards to someone making Hajj on behalf of someone else. If they're dead, that's one thing. As far as if they're physically alive and they're sick and they're weak, some say no. No Hajj is to be made on behalf of another. And no, we mentioned the view of his school is that it's lawful even if they're still living, as long as they are incapable. And there's someone else who is capable. Everybody clear on this? Moving forward. قال القاضي وحكي عن النخعي وبعض السلف لا يصح الحج عن ميت ولا غيره وهي رواية عن مالك وإن أوصى به. وقال الشافعي والجمهور يجوز الحج عن الميت عن فرضه ونذره سواء أوصى به أم لا ويجزي عنه. ومذهب الشافعي وغيره أن ذلك واجب في تركته وأن لا يجوز للعاجز الاستنابة في حجة التطوع على صحيح قولين متفق علماء على جواز حج المرأة عن الرجل إلا الحسن بن صالح فمنع وكذا يمنعه من منع أصل الاستنابة مطلقا والله أعلم. He says here, this shows that a woman can make Hajj on behalf of a man. A woman can make Hajj on behalf of a man. Some scholars, they differ on that. Qadr Iyad states, Ibrahim Nakhari, and some of the Salaf Salih, some of them said, Hajj is not to be made for a deceased Muslim. Nor is Hajj to be made for someone who's living, who's incapable. And one time Malik said that. وَإِنْ أَوْصَى بِهِ, even if a person puts it in his will, his wasiyah. As far as Imam Shafi'i, most of the scholars that may have the view is that Hajj can be made for someone who's dead, the Hajj which is fard, and the Hajj which is nadr, a vow that's made to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whether they put it in the will or not. And that is valid, and that is lawful, easy said. Also, the ruling on delegating or deputizing someone to make Hajj for you, even if it's tatawwa, if it's additional, if it's extra, if it's not the Hajjatul Wada'. Inshallah ta'ala. We're going to stop here tonight, bismillah. And that hadith, as you can see from the fawaid of it, the obligation of lowering one's gaze. And it goes to show you that a righteous, pious person could fall short in lowering his gaze. A righteous, pious person could fall short in that. And it goes to show you the natural attraction and the natural inclination between man and female, male and female. It's natural. And the natural inclination or desire isn't to be shunned or shamed. It's not condemned. It's not taboo. It's natural for a boy to like a girl, girl to like a boy. Now, how you handle it, how you manage it, that's a different story. You understand the difference? That's very important with regards to parenting. Many people, they shame their sons and their daughters for liking the opposite sex. They shame their sons and their daughters for wanting to get married. I can't have a boyfriend, I can't have a girlfriend, and I'm past puberty. Yes, I'm 16, 18, I'm 19. They say you just want to get married to what? To fulfill your desires. You just, you just want to get married to have sex. That's the only reason why you want to get married. That's not good parenting. That's bad parenting, rather. Okay, what else do they want to do? You can't have a boyfriend or girlfriend. Haram. What are they supposed to do? How are they supposed to fulfill their need? If that was the only reason why someone wanted to get married, so be it. Are there other aspects to marriage? Yes. Dynamics to marriage? Yes. Responsibilities to marriage? Yes. But if someone says, I need to fulfill my desires, and I don't want to disobey the law, it's not rocket science. The equation is pretty simple. Everyone understand this? So that's natural. And the natural way is never something which is shameful or shunned. Okay? Father looked at the woman, and the woman, what? She looked back at him. The Prophet, he stopped it. He took control of the situation. He regulated the situation. But he never spoke on the nature of the situation. Right? Allah surely knows best. And with him is all success.